I remember growing up hearing about Star Trek. They did the little Vulcan sign. It's crazy because, in the Philippines, they have a saying, mabuhay, right? And that's like long live, right? This salute means live long and prosper. So I was like, man, that's like Philippines, bro. Killing it. But welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate you guys coming by very much. So I do have the game. Alireza Firouzja versus Hikaru Nakamura. Taking out round 3. And as you guys probably are aware, there is a peace sacrifice in the game. Gangster level stuff. But for all of my people that are coming from the Philippines, like I said before, mabuhay, magandang umaga. It is 10 a.m. So rise and shine. You guys are getting close to lunchtime. So mag lunch na tayo. Anybody who is coming from France, I will say bonjour. Comment ça va? Comment allez-vous, mes amis? Ça me fait plaisir de te voir. I appreciate you guys very much. Merci beaucoup. Anybody who is coming from France, or not from France, from Iran, I will say salam and khili mamnoon. I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. But yes, if you guys are ready to go, let's take a look and see what we have in this game, man. So we got the move d4. We got knight to f6. We got c4, e6, and then knight to c3. So we are inviting the Nimzo Indian defense, and that is what we see in the game. Bishop goes to b4 is the Nimzo Indian. It's a pretty popular opening, people that like throwing around, opening names and things. I mean, Nimzo Indian is definitely in the conversation, and we do see the move queen to c2. It's just a very logical move. You're just trying to do a little bit of defense on this knight with the queen. I mean, it's also possible to take back with the pawn if the bishop does take. But some players prefer to go queen to c2 or even queen to b3. We do see castles by black. We got a3, bishop takes c3, queen takes c3, and then we do have the move d5. We got bishop to g5, just saying, pin it and win it. This isn't like, the craziest pin ever. I mean, you definitely have the ability to get out of it, but you can always play like knight b to d7 or something like that, You're just good to go. We do see pawn takes c4, queen takes c4. We do have the move b6. And we are thinking either bishop to b7 or bishop to a6. This knight is doing a good job at supporting. Right now, bishop to a6 is not like, going to just be crazy attacking the queen, but it will force it to move. So we do have the move rook to d1, and then bishop does come to a6. And then we have queen over to a4. We see h6. Bishop comes back to h4. So like I said before, I mean, this pin is not like the worst ever. Slightly annoying, but I mean, you're still good to go. We do see queen to e7. We got knight up to f3. We see rook over to d8. We see queen back to c2. And then we do have the move c5. What we really don't want is to allow, e4 to come. And then, e5 to come, because this is going to be a little bit, it's going to kind of suck if you have e5 coming, because, this knight is completely pinned. So that would make the pin, that much more annoying. And we do see, like I said, the move c5. But if we back up, after we see the move back queen to c2, queen to c2 is definitely not the most common line. What we normally see in this position is actually just e3. It might seem kind of strange because you're like, I'm about to just trade my bishop on f1 and my king or the rook has to move, and then I can't castle, right? But I mean, the king isn't really in all that much danger in the center of the board. We're good. So you would see bishop takes f1, rook takes f1. The crazy thing is this position is like about 90% drawn in the database. So like almost every single game has been drawn. Crazy. So like I said, we do see queen to c2. We see c5. And then we do have the novelty of the game, which is e4, which doesn't have that much sting to it because, you can always take here if you'd like. We do see bishop taking f1. So we really see this anyway. So, I mean, you can still go, do it the other way. We do see rook taking f1, and then we have the move g5. And it is at this point that Hikaru Nakamura realized he messed up. No, I'm playing. He didn't mess up. This is like one of the most logical moves to play in the position. And any of you guys that play an h6 g5 situation to try to break out of a pin, which there are a lot of different positions that you can get into with that, you'll know that sometimes it's not sound It's a little kamikaze to play this way. I normally play Bullet Online, so people literally do this to me all the time, and it's just like, it doesn't always work. Sometimes it doesn't work. But we do see the piece sacrifice. Knight takes g5, pawn takes g5, and then bishop takes g5. Like I said, you guys that play on the black side, or you know, this mostly happens to you on the black side. You know, this is a super duper common you know, piece sacrifice. I mean, you do get some good compensation for sacrificing. I mean, as you can see, this king is super wide open. So, you know, you definitely have some things to, you know, write home about. If, you know, you can never get this rook lift in, I mean, it's looking pretty nasty. And then e5 is on the cards too, just getting the piece back. So, I mean, you know, white definitely has some compensation for the piece. We do see knight to c6. We got queen down to c1. You know, we are looking at trying to, you know, just add so much pressure onto this knight. And if we can do that, I mean, like I said, I mean, this king is just wide open. So we can't allow that to happen. So we do see rook takes d4, rook takes d4, a knight takes d4, and then queen comes to f4. And you got to do something drastic. So we do see knight coming to c2 with check. We see king over to d1. We see queen coming over to d7. And now we have unpinned ourselves with tempo. The king does take c2, and then we do see queen over to a4 with check. The king goes down to b1, and then queen takes e4 with check. Queen takes, knight takes, and we have, as Hikaru Nakamura, you know, pretty much found the most logical route to make sure that we can get our piece back and we can unpin ourselves. So, I mean, super duper accurate play by Hikaru. You know, that's what he's known for. He's pretty gangster with it. I don't know if you guys ever seen him play any games before, but, you know, he does a little something, something. We do see bishop down to f4. You know, of course, our bishop was attacked on g5. We don't want to just lose it, right? The knight comes back to f6. We do see h4. We see knight to d5, and we see the most logical move. It's not the only move by far, but it's a very, very logical move, and there's really good, like, reasonings behind it. We do see bishop down to d2. Now, of course, we do have these two pawns, like, preventing the knight from coming on this side, but visually, this is something that you want to pay attention to, because when you get into endgames and you have bishops playing against knights, these are definitely things that you want to try to do. If you notice, this bishop is controlling just about every square that the knight can try to, like, you know, come forward on. So it is basically dominating this knight. As you can see, this knight only has the ability to really jump here if we're talking about trying to come into white's position. So the knight at this moment is not allowed to do that. And that can be pretty huge. If you guys, you know, ever see a knight, you know, getting on the rim and you have the ability to put a bishop in this type of configuration, you basically can make the knight just be stuck on the edge of the board forever. Just completely dominated. So keep that in mind. We do see the move f5. We got g3. We got king to f7. We see f3. A rook goes to h8. And we do have the move bishop to g5 because we are wanting to push the move g4 and, you know, make these pawns be a little more loose. But we can't do that if the h4 pawn is not defended because we're just losing pawns for no reason. We're not trying to do that, man. So we do see c4. We got g4. We got b5. A rook comes to d1. And now the threat of pawn capturing here cannot be met by pawn capturing here because this knight is going to be hanging. So we do see pawn taking g4, pawn taking g4. We see the move a5. We got h5. Rook goes over to g8, just throwing a nice little attack on this bishop. And it's a little inconvenient because not only are we attacking the bishop, we're attacking the pawn that's behind it. So we do see the move rook to f1 with check. The king sidesteps up to e8. And we have reached a point in the game that, you know, if you do want to pause the video and see what move Alireza Firouzja plays in this position, go ahead and do so. Okay, so, I mean, you know, like I said to you guys a second ago, not only is this rook attacking this bishop, but it's also attacking the pawn behind it, right? So it's like, where do you go? You know what I'm saying? Like, what do you do in this position? Because, I mean, you know, like, if you move your bishop somewhere, like, if you move it back to d2 or something, right? I mean, you're just going to be losing the pawn for no reason. And now you're down a pawn, right? So, Firouzja does not do that. Firouzja says, man, I'm too gangster for that stuff, bro. So he actually goes h6. So if you found h6, realizing that if this rook takes this bishop, this pawn is queening, then you would be super duper gangster. That's nice to find that. But as you guys can see, this bishop is hanging. But if you push this pawn, of course, if this rook takes here, you can push this pawn up. The rook does not have the ability to come to the only two squares that prevent this pawn from queening. It cannot go back to g8, and it cannot sidestep over to h5. So being able to see that at a glance in this position is pretty nice. I mean, you have a lot of time, though, in these games. So, I mean, you know, being able to see stuff like that is not like, you know, just completely just out the clear blue. So, like I said, we do see h6. And Hikaru says, man, I'm too great for that, too. So I'm going to go ahead and sidestep over to f8 and see what's going on. So the rook takes f8. King takes f8, and then we do see bishop going to d8, you know, tickling this pawn over here, seeing what it's talking about, and we are going to be moving g5 after that. So we do see a4, and then the pawn goes up to g5. The king goes down to f7. We see h7. The king goes to g7, and then we do see the move g6. And this is another type of an in-game concept. You know, connected past pawns, you know, they do protect each other. So you don't even need this bishop anywhere around here. This pawn is protecting this pawn, and this pawn can never be taken because this pawn is just going to push. So just for example, let's say for example, like, you know, like black does like something just random or whatever. Let's say that, I don't know, just move the knight here or something like that, right? No, hold on. Sorry, I can just take the pawn directly. Okay. So let's say the pawn does do that, or the king does do that, right? Of course, this is just queening the pawn. So that's the entire idea behind, you know, having connected past pawns and making sure that, you know, the king cannot step forward because you're just going to be queening. So that's something also to keep in mind. You know, the king doesn't have to go up and help these connected past pawns. So we do see the move c3, trying to break up white structure. You got to kind of do something. There aren't a whole lot of moves in this position. Pawn takes c3. Knight takes c3 with check. The king comes up to c2. And Hikaru Nakamura has to find this only move, which is knight back to d5. The problem is you have the ability with this bishop to place a check here and deflect the king away from the protection of this square. Whether he chooses to take or like a move away or whatever the situation is, you are going to be protecting this queening square and deflecting the king. So knight to d5 is the only move that protects against that, because if you go like knight to e4 thinking, hey, I'm going to protect this square, you're looking at bishop to c7. And the problem is the bishop is going to be coming to e5 and you are checking, and it's the same idea. So you have to make sure that you defend against all of that. And knight to d5 is the only move that does that. So even though it seems kind of random, you know, you seem like I got options, Hikaru found the only move that you need to find in this position. So we do see bishop down to g5, you know, kind of having a similar idea, seeing if maybe he could come down like something like this and then check this way and, you know, try to force the king away. So we do see the move e5, just cutting off that diagonal completely. We're not having any of that either. The king goes to d2. The king goes back to h8. We see king down to e1. b4, damaging your structure. Pawn takes b4. We got a3. And now we got to do some redirecting. So the bishop has to come down here. And be prepared to come to b2 so that you can protect against a1 because that pawn is dangerously close. The bishop does come down to c1. We see knight takes b4. King goes to d2. We see knight back to d5. Bishop takes on a3. We see knight to f4. We got bishop down to b2. The knight does take on g6. We do see bishop taking e5. Knight taking e5. And you guys can already see that this is going into a forced draw. The king is going up to c3, king takes h7, king goes to d4, and the game is drawn by insufficient material. Because as you guys know, you cannot checkmate with just a knight and a king. And the crazy thing is you can't even checkmate with two knights and a king. Unless basically the opponent like puts himself in the corner and checkmates himself. Which no respecting chess player is going to do. But that is the end of that game. Like I said, we did have, you know, the piece sacrifice, which made things kind of nice. But you know, we had actually like kind of a wealth of information in this type of a game. You know, you had a lot of different in-game concepts and thoughts that you had to do. So, I mean, even though it did get into a draw, it was a little bit tricky. So everybody coming from the Philippines, maraming salamat aking makaibigan. Merci beaucoup, mes amis, coming from France. Khaili Mamnoon coming from Iran. And I'll see you guys next time.